Welcome back to Fully Alive. This is the Halloween edition. We're going to be talking about monster movies and why we like them, some concerns we ought to have, and ultimately how monster movies can actually help us to worship God and live lives that are fully alive. Hit the music. This is Justin Westmoreland, and you're listening to the Fully Alive podcast, where we integrate physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual relational health so that we can become a fully alive community together. All right, so here we are on Fully Alive. We're talking about why we like scary movies. What are some of the things that we can learn from them? What are some of the things we might need to be concerned about with our fascination with scary movies? And how can they help us to worship God and be more fully alive? This is a particularly relevant issue today because we are in the Halloween season. Oh, I just forgot to tell you, I'm wearing a skull face mask. I don't know what this is. This is a funny mask. I picked it up. This is the kind of stuff you see during Halloween, and I'm going to take it off because it's really hot. All right. So as we're out and about, you cannot help but run into Halloween and horror and scary movies. They're everywhere. In fact, I'm taking my kids home the other day, and I see a life-size mannequin of the character from the Halloween movies, Michael Myers, and that's just terrifying. You know, it's like that's kind of right out of the movies. This someone in our neighborhood has really invested a lot in getting into the Halloween spirit. You see, these sort of monster movies have become culturally relevant, and they used to be sort of on the fringes of culture, but now they're very mainstream. If you've watched any college football or any television recently, you've probably seen the Geico commercial where they've got the people running around being chased by someone. And they talk about how if you're in a horror movie, you're going to make bad decisions. It's what you do. But if you want to save on car insurance, you call Geico. It's a great one. If you haven't seen it, they say, well, we could go hide in the running car or somewhere else, but let's go hide behind the chainsaws. Again, bad decisions. All right. So you're thinking about this. We get the joke because we're in on the joke. We've participated in that genre enough that it's relevant. Geico thinks it's going to sell insurance and convert people over to their brand. So we got to admit that is a big cultural force right now. If you've seen recent movies that are coming out, you've got It Part 2. I missed It Part 1. I don't get it. But if you've seen it, hey, go ahead and hit like if you've seen it. Hit subscribe if you haven't seen it. Hey, mash something on your screen and respond, comment on it. Tell me what the big deal about this is. I know Stephen King wrote it, but I just haven't seen it yet. And I'm wondering, what is the big deal about that? But I do know this is a relevant factor in our culture, and we want to talk about it and how it relates to being fully alive. So why do I think that these are big deals? I'm going to give you 6 reasons real quick why I think they're a big force in our world right now. I think the first one is the cultural shift. And I think we're driven a lot in our current era by sort of punk culture, the outsider culture, feeling like we're on the margins. We feel in our postmodern, post-Christian context that a lot of our institutions have let us down, whether it be government or religion. The studies show that these big cornerstones of our civilization are trusted less and less in our current day in Western culture. And you can smell that, you can swim in that, you see that. People just don't trust the authority. And so there's this anti-authoritarianism. We all kind of feel like outsiders. We don't really fit with what our previous generation was. And so there's a natural inclination to sort of have this margin culture or outsider culture. And that's why I think these movies, which are scary movies that were very absurd back in the day, are becoming part of the mainstream of our culture. And they make money. They're usually cheaply done or for not a lot of money, and they make a big profit, and people keep releasing them. So as you're thinking about that, our 20th century cultural and political failures, I think, really do play in to our current moment and why we appreciate this sort of culture, the monster movie culture. Secondly, we actually identify with the monster. I recently heard a quote on the Joe Rogan podcast from Rob Zombie, who is a maker of scary movies. And he says, Joe Rogan's like, why do you make these movies? They're crazy, they're sick, like people, this is so weird. And he says, well, I've always dug the outsider mentality. I didn't fit in as a kid. He says, I just didn't I was weird. And when he watched monster movies, he would identify with the monster, whether it be King Kong or Frankenstein. King Kong's just trying to do his thing and people want to shoot at him. Same thing with Frankenstein. He was just born yesterday. He doesn't get it. He doesn't fit in though. And so he relates to the monster. It's a pretty funny observation. I think a lot of people feel that sort of disorientation in our world that they don't fit in. And we all get that in some respect. Whether we all walk into any room and say, is anybody going to like me? Will I fit in here? There's this social anxiety we all have. And so we can sort of identify with these stories and what's going on the screen. So that they're very attractive in that regard. Third, they're therapeutic. Stephen King, who is a master of the horror genre in literature and in film, he says we make up horrors to help us cope with the real ones. We don't have to think about just the horror of the day-to-day life if we've got these novels and books and films to really to absorb ourselves into and to start to cope with the reality in a helpful way. So the therapeutic nature of them is one reason they sell. Horror movies specialize in exploring our fear of what lurks in the shadows. I don't know, my kids are in a very safe environment. I know your kids are. You grew up in a safe environment. A lot of you did, where you have, a house and a home and a bedroom. Even if you've got your parents tucking you into bed at night, kissing you goodnight, there's still this sort of nagging fear of, hey, there might be monsters under the bed. You have this fear of monsters and what's out there, what's in the shadows, what could possibly be lurking out there. We feel a sense that there is something just around the corner that might be against us and might be out to get us. So there's that feeling. And so it's a therapeutic thing to see the monster movie where the monster is conquered, right? So fourth, I think we want to be thrilled, of course. And this genre tends to be provocative and even political too. So we can think about our political views and they can affirm us. It's like an echo chamber. They start to tell us things that we want to hear in a very entertaining way. I used to watch The Walking Dead, but I stopped watching because it got too political. There's too much overt, I think, social commentary. I'm like, I'm just here for the zombies. I wasn't into it for all of that. So I feel like that can be obnoxious to the guys who just tune in like me just for the monsters, right? And so when the messaging gets too overt, too satirical, too political, it just wears some people out like me. But I'll tell you, that is one of the big benefits of these movies in our culture is, for instance, Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead was more than a zombie movie. It was an old one, a black and white one, but it was really a condemnation of racism, by looking at how the people treated the main character. So there's some benefits there, why we like these monster movies. The fifth one I want to mention is the mystery of it. We love mystery. We love time travel stuff. We love conspiracies. We love thrillers, murder mysteries, alternate realities, where there's these supernatural elements. And so the unexplainable, we love these things. And so when you think about when those things get unraveled, though, when the mystery is revealed, we tend to lose interest. For instance, Lost was a huge failure in its final episode because of its revealing some of the mysteries and taking away some of the mystique. My wife and I watched an old M. Night Shyamalan movie one time together, and we were just both floored at the movie Signs when they show the alien. It was so much more powerful when you couldn't see the alien, and when you see it, the mystery's taken away and it's less fulfilling. That was a very interesting kind of meta moment for us. We're thinking about, oh, this is how we experience these and why we like them. And so showing the mystery, revealing it, actually made our experience worse. We kind of like that mysterious stuff. So, and then finally, probably the greatest benefit of these movies in our culture is it can become a community thing for us. So we're all looking for community. We talk about relational health on the podcast a lot. And so if you can go to one of these movies with other people and get together, it's like a thrill ride. It's like getting on a roller coaster together and experiencing something that's going to thrill you. And that's always better to do in community. And so the community of people who like the same things, and there are some really strong communities around these films and books and even comic books. That's one way you can sort of reach out and make friends, which we need friends. We long for friends because we're in the image of God, and God is three persons and one God, and we all can't escape the desire to be known and to know others. We are longing for that, and we'll form communities around almost anything, especially these. So that's the first segment. We'll take a break and hit number 2 on concerns with the genre. Hey, I just wolfed out. There's a full moon. If you've ever seen a werewolf movie or Teen Wolf or anything like that, you know the werewolf is a big deal in the monster movie genre. All right, so I'm taking this off. It's really hot, and I'm back to myself again. I've come back to myself. Okay, so as we're thinking about things you ought to be concerned about as you're participating in the culture phenomenon of Halloween and monster movies, well, let me tell you, it's not like these genres, this movie, are gonna be implicitly more dangerous spiritually than any other movie you could watch, particularly. Okay, I want to make a case for that. I mean, you're talking about monsters and evil spirits and things like that. Well, it's like when you think about what the playbook of Satan is, he wants to make you think he doesn't exist. He wants to make you think these supernatural things aren't real. And so the overt attacks don't come in the ways you think, right? So you would think common wisdom would think, well, hey, let's not watch these things because they're dangerous, because they talk about evil spirits and the devil and things like that. Well, not so fast. I think you can get as much negative effects to your life and worldview through any other movie, any book that glorifies whether it be greed or lust or any other thing besides these monster movies and horror. So I know they're a little more fringy and less accepted culturally and socially, and that's sort of one of the draws to them. But let's not go overboard and say, well, you shouldn't watch these things just because they deal with these subjects, and you shouldn't actually dress up and go and do Halloween because that's a devil's holiday or something like that. Well, actually, there's a lot of stuff you can look up on the origin of Halloween. But I've always taken the approach with my family that we love to do Halloween because one time each year where our neighbors will open up their homes and invite us to come and knock on their door. And it is so weird to go and knock on your neighbor's door sometime uninvited. So the invitation to go and actually knock on a neighbor's door and perhaps meet a new neighbor is a great thing. And so I say let's double our participation in Halloween. Let's do more Halloween because it gives us an opportunity to get to know other people. And even to go trick-or-treating with other people. It's a good social activity. Everyone's off work. You go and you take your kids around the neighborhood. We can do a big group every year with our kids all going up the doors at the same time. And you see the parents there in the group too. So there's a lot of benefit to doing the trick-or-treating thing and participating in some of these activities on Halloween. So don't just discount Halloween entirely. But there are some concerns. So first concern is it's usually portraying a deistic worldview, that God is not a part of this world, and that there's no supernatural elements at play in our world, and this is just frankly unbiblical. There's usually a worldview communicated of meaningless skepticism. The religion is bankrupt, and so you got to watch that. This is a part of our wallpaper of our world in rebellion against God. And so there's a movie I saw recently it's a group of killers, and one of the killers had died, and they're just sad because their friend has died, and they're evil people. They kill people, and they're like, so they kind of have a moment where they're thinking about bigger issues, and they say, well, what's the point of all this? And so died, and they're thinking, well, but he had a good run. He had a great run. He raised a lot of mayhem in his life, and he says it's all coming for us someday. We just got to have fun while we're here and do as much kill as we can, essentially. I paraphrased it, but that is a foolish worldview, a foolish view of life, that everything is meaningless. So let's just eat, drink, and be merry, have fun while we're here. There is more purpose, and I think if you understand that you're made in the image of God to worship Him, created to use your gifts for His purposes, and to manage creation and use those talents God's given you, then there is a reason to get up every day and be excited about life and have a purpose, even when you're going through suffering. I'd refer you back to last week's episode with Joel and Barb, and how they've had to wrestle with that, and how this is part of all of our stories. And ultimately, we go through suffering, but it's not purposeless when we suffer. And so you got to think about that. Is there meaning and purpose in life? And a lot of the movies we see just communicate nihilism. There is no inherent meaning in what we're experiencing. It's all foolishness. So let's just eat, drink, and be merry and have as much fun as we can, because we're all going to die. All right. So again, no more dangerous than watching any other movie, perhaps, that just says, well, money is the root of all happiness. Everything else is meaningless. These are all vices in our world that can become God's substitutes. And this is not a unique genre to the monster movie, or not a unique problem to them, but all of them can communicate a meaninglessness to life that's not helpful, frankly. So you need to ask, as you're watching each film, especially if you're watching some of these movies with your kids, what is the creator of the content trying to communicate? There's always ideas that are expressed in this. For instance, Star Wars, George Lucas was saying, hey, we're going to try to communicate Buddhism to the world, to the Western world, through Star Wars. There's always some kind of philosophy or an idea that the maker of the movie is trying to create through the fiction. Awesome to be able to ask those questions and start to think about the philosophical presuppositions that are being worked out within the film. 2, evil is glorified, and this is a problem in a lot of movies today. And as G.K. Chesterton once wrote on this particular topic, when you're talking about stories, we typically want happy endings, good and moral stories that deal with real issues. Well, he says, if the characters are not wicked, the book is wicked. And so wickedness, is not a benign thing, right? When we should see it in the stories very clearly. And a lot of our characters these days, and if you ever watch Breaking Bad, you'll know this, that we really delighted in the gray characters. The characters that are not the good is not always good, and the evil is not always as evil as you think it is. And you see that today in characters like the Joker, which have been portrayed by Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, and now by Joaquin Phoenix in the newest movie, The Joker. And you even become sympathetic to the evil and start to root for the evil. And so it can really mess with you in a lot of ways. So evil is sort of glorified in all of these things. Well, then you got to ask, why are we so mad about this anyway? If there's no such thing as meaning or evil or good, where do we get these categories from? We get them from the Bible. We get them from living in God's world. We all have a conscience of God, and when we think in categories of good and evil. And so for movies or stories or anything else to start to upend our ideas of good and evil and create them to be relative is something we need to be aware of, that what we consume and the media we consume will have an effect on what we believe. Is important to think, because we all do know good and evil. We know it. We feel it. We feel when someone's wronged us. We feel when someone pleases us and gives to us sacrificially and loves us. It warms our heart, but we respond against evil. We feel it. It's part of our world, part of who we are. So we're going to move. Well, that's just a couple concerns: the upending of evil, the kind of sneaky worldview stuff that's in there, but realizing, hey, this is in everything we consume, not just these particular movies in this particular season. So that's section 2. We're going to move on to section 3.
There you go.
All right, welcome back to segment 3, the final episode of the Why We Like Scary Movies episode of Fully Alive. Now, it's ironic I'm talking about being fully alive and I'm wearing the ghost face mask, right? The ghost face was an epic mask back in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. When I was in college, I tell you, one of the scariest movies I ever saw was Scream, which is what this is from, and it's a really kind of genius movie on the genre of horror and scary movies that was sort of making fun of the whole situation as well. So as we move into our final segment, we got to think about how do these movies help us to worship God and to live lives that are fully alive. How can we become more fully alive through even these movies? Well, the scripture does teach us that there is a devil prowling around like a lion looking to devour God's people. This is in 1 Peter 5:8. Ephesians 6 tells us to put on the whole armor of God because we're wrestling against powers of darkness. Now, these movies hit on those ideas of there are actually spiritual realities, whether it's The Ring or all these other movies that I think are extremely scary, or there's these supernatural entities and ghost-like creatures. But you see even animals or people who are possessed by things. It's fascinating. This is biblical. These monster stories are in the Bible. You think about the very first story of the Bible, there's a monster story in it. There's a serpent who speaks, okay, who is possessed by an evil spirit called Satan, who lies and tempts our first parents, Adam and Eve, to disbelieve God and eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Isn't that fascinating? The very first story of the Bible is a monster story. Is it any surprise that we resonate with these stories? Now, what did the monster do? The monster began to ask the woman who he encountered in Genesis 3 if God really said these things. And the woman responded with, well, yes, he said these things. Yes, sure he did. But then, you know what the next move was? There's 3 moves. The second move was, after the first move of questioning, did God say this? The monster says, hey, you know what? God's really bad. He's really evil. Trust me. You can trust me. What he says is just because he's jealous. He wants to hold something back from you. And that's really, these movies try to teach us, hey, we're not getting all that we can here. There's something that's out to get us, and it could be God. That's what the tempter is telling you, that really God is not for you. Don't trust him. And finally, what the monster says is, hey, you can't trust God, but let me show you this. Look at the fruit. It's really good. You should check it out for yourself and see just how good it is. So the woman looked at it, saw that it was attractive and good to eat. She took it, ate it, gave some to her husband who was with her. And that's how temptation works. A monster story right there in the first story of the Bible. Well, let's fast forward ahead to the New Testament. When Jesus arrives and is born of the Virgin and starts to minister to people and call his disciples in the very beginnings of the Gospels, what does he encounter? Monsters. People possessed by these monstrous spirits, Satan and demons. There's a man who is cutting himself, running around naked in the cemetery, and he's possessed by legion. He's dangerous. People try to tie him up and subdue him. They can't. He breaks chains. This is a demonic person who is possessed. And then Jesus, by a word, takes the monster and casts him out. And the people, when they see this, they see the man fully clothed and in his right mind and sitting there calm. And they're shocked. They're astonished. This is the ultimate monster story. You see the monster return vividly in Revelation. This is why when I was a kid, I didn't go to church, but I'd go to church and I'd see, my friends would say, hey, if you really want to get into this stuff, you got to read Revelation. It's a monster story. There's monsters in it. And it's really amazing. If you look at Revelation 12, for instance, you see a gigantic dragon seeking to devour a baby as it's being born. That is horrific. That's gruesome imagery. And again, God overcomes the monster. And ultimately the monster is cast into a lake of fire. A lot of what we're seeing in these monster movies is nothing unique, it's nothing new. It's just the biblical story rehashed and tweaked, and maybe with a lot of its goodness ripped out of it. In our world, we see redemption. We see justice through the Redeemer, and we see mercy and grace through the Redeemer. But a lot of our movies have no Redeemer. Sometimes they'll have somebody swoop in at the very end and be the Redeemer. And that's very satisfying. Someone saves the day and overcomes the monster. That's what we're looking for, is the monster slayer, the dragon slayer. And that's what we have in Christ. If you have somebody who's redeemed you and is actually not just redeemed you, but is created the world with a purpose, and it's regular, and you can hone in on those principles and learn them and start to train your body, train your mind, understand how the world works. As we saw last week with Joel and Barb, and how their training has helped their body, which has helped their spirit, and has helped them to persevere and love and live fully alive lives. They are blessings to people. Won't you take the time to consider Jesus and consider his word and consider that he is governing all things, and look at those principles, rather than making your training and your eating and your relationships all about you. There's a greater purpose. It's about redeeming what's lost, overcoming the brokenness and the curse of where the monster has cast us. The monster has cast us into a world that is broken, and we know it. What happens in Genesis 3 after the monster tempts Adam and Eve and they give in to the temptation and rebel against God? Well, they're cast out of God's presence, and there is no life there. There's only death. It says there that to Adam, who is cursed, it says, you are made out of dust, and you're going to toil the dust. You're going to work the dust in the ground, and it's going to be a curse on you. It's going to be hard. You're going to work by the sweat of your brow, and eventually it's going to consume you. We're all going to be consumed by the very thing that we're working on. The dust is going to reach up and consume us. And that's why these monster movies do appeal to us. They really show us what we're actually feeling, which is we are being consumed, and death is coming for us all because of the curse and because of our sin. It came to that one man and the monster's temptation, but there is a greater man who is bringing that monster to judgment, and he's bringing justice to all who rebel against him, and he's bringing grace to all of his people who he's going to save from the monster, from sin. And that's the good news. That you really can't, I don't think, get anywhere with training ultimately and to live fully alive if you're not believing that there is a purposeful Redeemer who's making all things new. Otherwise, it's hopeless. So with that said, y'all enjoy the Halloween season. Next week, we're going to have a very great episode for you guys. We're going to be releasing content every Monday. So we record them kind of on Friday, and we're going to be producing stuff every you'll be getting it Monday. So make sure you subscribe so you can get the notification. If you like it, hit like, hit subscribe, and share this. Comment. Tell us what the deal is with it. What's your favorite scary movie? Do you like scary movies? Let us know what you think, and if anything that you heard helped you to think about scary movies in a new way, share that. And again, click this podcast, send it to a friend, let them listen. I think it's worth your time. Have a great Halloween, everybody, and we'll talk to you later.